Laura came home earlier than expected that afternoon. An important meeting had been cancelled, and she thought about surprising her husband, David. In her mind, she carried the hope of an intimate moment, something to reconnect them like in the old days. When she opened the front door, everything seemed calm, but something felt off. The silence was too heavy. As she approached the bedroom, she heard muffled laughter and whispers. Her heart began to race. With a trembling hand, she slowly pushed the bedroom door open. The sight before her made her head spin. There, in the bed she shared with David, were him and her own mother, Karen, tangled together, laughing and completely at ease. Laura froze for a moment, unable to believe what she was seeing. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a double betrayal, coming from the two people she trusted most in the world. Blood rushed to her head, but no sound escaped her lips. She stood there, watching the grotesque scene unfold. David was the first to notice her. "Laura!" He jumped out of bed in a panic, trying to cover himself with whatever he could grab. "It's not what it looks like." Karen, instead of showing any remorse, simply smiled, smug. "You're home early, sweetheart." That shameless remark snapped Laura out of her shocked state. A wave of anger surged through her, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. Screaming and confronting them head-on wouldn't solve anything. She needed to be smarter. Laura slowly closed the door behind her. As if she were merely beginning a game she was determined to win. "So this is how it is," Laura said coldly, locking eyes with David. "You two think this will just blow over?" "Babe, David started, but Laura cut him off. "Don't call me babe." She stepped forward, her eyes now filled with a frightening calm. "You'll both pay for this." Karen smiled, convinced her daughter was just throwing a jealous tantrum. "Don't be so dramatic, Laura. You've always been intense. You'll get over it soon enough." Laura smiled back, but hers was a cold, distant smile. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm already over it." Without another word, she turned on her heel and left the room, leaving them behind. But Laura knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. The battle was just beginning, and this time she would set the rules. It was clear to Laura that her revenge had to be carefully planned. No one would see the storm that was about to come. Laura left the room without making a scene, but her mind was racing. The pain and betrayal burned in her chest, yet reacting impulsively didn't seem like enough. She needed something bigger, something that David and Karen would never forget. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of water and forced herself to think clearly. Anger couldn't control her now. "I'll handle this my way," she thought, mentally outlining her plan. Her phone rang. It was Sarah, her best friend. Laura hesitated but answered. "Laura, are you okay?" Sarah asked, concerned. "Not really," Laura responded, her voice still calm. "But I will be. I need to meet with you tomorrow. There's a lot I need to tell you." Sarah, who knew Laura well enough to sense something serious had happened, didn't press further. "Course. Call me anytime." Laura hung up, a slight smile forming on her lips. Sarah would play an important role in what was coming. She would need allies, and more importantly, someone to help carry the weight of this fight. After taking another deep breath, Laura returned to the hallway, this time with a serene and calculated demeanor. She opened the bedroom door again and faced David and Karen, who looked at her suspiciously, waiting for another reaction. "Here's the deal, David," Laura began, her voice steady. "You want to be with my mother. That's fine. But tomorrow you're leaving my house." "What?" David's eyes widened in disbelief. "Laura, we don't have to do this. We can work things out." "Work things out?" Laura let out a sarcastic laugh. "Do you really think there's an us after this?" Karen, always feeling superior, crossed her arms with a smug smile. "There's no need to be so harsh, sweetheart. We can talk this through." Laura ignored her. "David, you're packing your bags tomorrow morning." "I'm done talking." David tried to protest, but the determined look in Laura's eyes silenced him. There was a new energy in her, something he didn't recognize, and it made him uneasy. "You'll regret this, Laura," he muttered, trying to intimidate her. Laura smiled calmly. Don't worry, darling. When I'm done, the only one with regrets will be you." Without saying another word, Laura left the room. She had a lot to prepare that night, and her plan was just beginning to take shape. The next morning, Laura woke up early, more determined than ever. As she descended the stairs, David was already in the kitchen, sitting with his head down and a defeated expression. He tried to avoid eye contact but knew he had no choice but to leave, just as she had ordered. "Your bags are in the hallway. I don't want you coming back here even to grab a toothbrush," Laura said coldly. David let out an irritated sigh. "And you think you can just kick me out like this? This house is mine too." Laura stood her ground. "Oh really? We'll see what the lawyer has to say about that." David frowned, but the argument was interrupted by Karen's entrance. "It doesn't have to be like this, Laura." Her mother spoke in a calm tone, as if she were completely in control of the situation. "You'll thank me one day." "Thank you." Laura let out a bitter laugh. "The audacity you have to say that is almost admirable." Karen smiled triumphantly, as if she had already won the battle. "David is with me now. He'll love me more than he ever loved you." Laura tilted her head, as if observing a game about to come to an end. "Good for you, Mom. I hope the adrenaline lasts. Because you're both going to need it." Without offering any further explanations, Laura grabbed her car keys and left the house. She knew exactly where she was going: the meeting with Sarah. Hours later, Laura met Sarah at a discreet cafe. As soon as they sat down, Laura vented. "I caught David and my mother together. In my bed." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "You're kidding. Your own mother. What are you going to do?" Laura took a deep breath. "He's already out of my house, but this is just the beginning. I need your help for something bigger." Sarah narrowed her eyes, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" Laura smiled, a vengeful glint in her eyes. "David doesn't know it, but that company he dreamed of starting depends on me. I'm the main investor. And tomorrow he's going to find out in the worst way possible." Sarah let out a short laugh. "Brilliant. And what about Karen?" Laura interlaced her fingers, thoughtful. "She always thought she could manipulate me. But now I want her to see what it feels like to be betrayed." Sarah nodded. "Count me in. We'll get back at both of them." Laura felt that the first piece of her plan was in place. The revenge wouldn't just be swift, it would be relentless. From that moment on, she would stop at nothing to reclaim everything that was hers, and to destroy the castle of lies that Karen and David had built. The next day, Laura woke up early and went to David's office, where he had been trying to start his consulting business. Unbeknownst to him, Laura had invested a significant amount to get the project off the ground. Now she was ready to turn the tables. At the bank, she cancelled any transfers that kept the project running. With just a few clicks, the company David had dreamed of was now jeopardized. His phone would soon ring with the news. Without Laura's money, the suppliers would abandon the project, and the contracts would be nullified. First step completed, she murmured to herself, a satisfied smile on her face. Before heading home, Laura called an important contact, the family lawyer. "Dr. Nelson, I need to initiate the divorce process. I want everything done quickly. Oh, and if you could include an asset freeze clause, even better. I don't want David taking anything from here." The lawyer confirmed, as efficient as always. Laura hung up the phone, and for the first time in days, she felt in control. A tense encounter. When Laura arrived home, she found David and Karen in the living room. He looked clearly shaken, speaking on the phone and trying to resolve the chaos at the company. As soon as he saw her enter, he hung up angrily. "It was you, wasn't it?" he shouted, advancing toward her. "You sabotaged my business." Laura crossed her arms, unfazed. "It was my money, and I decided you don't deserve it. How can you be so cold?" David yelled, distraught. Karen, sitting next to him, stood up with an air of superiority. "Laura, you need to get over this. We're together now. You're not going to destroy our happiness." Laura smiled, but it wasn't a smile of happiness. It was one of satisfaction. "Happiness? You haven't even begun to understand what it means to lose everything." David tried to advance again, but Laura stepped forward, confident. "Oh, and I've already spoken to my lawyer. The divorce is in progress. And by the way, you won't be taking anything but your clothes." David turned pale, trying to process the information. Karen, on the other hand, kept her gaze fixed on Laura, as if she couldn't believe her daughter had such coldness. "Do you think you're going to come out on top in this, Laura?" Karen murmured, narrowing her eyes. Laura leaned in slightly and replied in a calm tone, "I already have." The silence in the room was thick, but Laura knew the battle was far from over. Now, it was just a matter of time before they both understood the true extent of her revenge. The following days were chaotic for David. Without Laura's funds, the investors he had convinced began to abandon the project. His dreams crumbled before his eyes, and all the doors that once seemed open quickly slammed shut. At home, Karen tried to keep up appearances, but even she began to realize the situation was spiraling out of control. "We can't let her win, David," she insisted, trying to lift his spirits as he sank deeper into frustration. David, however, no longer hid his regret. Losing Laura meant losing the foundation that held his life together. Maybe we went too far," he murmured, downcast, as Karen looked at him in disbelief. "Now you want to give up? After everything?" David ran his hands through his hair, desperate. "It's not about giving up. It's just that Laura, she wasn't just my wife. She was the basis of everything." Karen huffed, impatient. "It's no use lamenting now. We need to find a way out of this." While David and Karen futilely tried to devise a plan, Laura continued her silent revenge. During a dinner with Vanessa, she revealed her next move. "My mother has always depended on the allowance my father left us. Now that my lawyer is handling the asset division, I'm going to cut that source too. I want to see how far their love lasts without money." Vanessa flashed a knowing smile. "That's going to tear them apart." Laura took a sip of wine, calm and collected. "Sooner or later, they'll destroy themselves. I'm just speeding up the process." Karen, used to living comfortably without working, felt the blow when she learned her allowance would be temporarily frozen until the legal proceedings were over. She tried to argue with Laura but found her daughter unyielding. "You think you own the world, don't you?" Karen snapped, feeling the weight of her choices for the first time. Laura simply watched her, serene. "I don't own the world, Mom. But I am the master of my destiny, and you no longer have a part in it." The tension between them became unbearable, and the days passed slowly for Karen and David, who began to argue more frequently. The atmosphere of passion that had once existed between them transformed into accusations and frustrations. One night, after an intense fight, David exploded. "I lost everything because of you. I should have stayed with Laura." Karen froze, the mask of control finally slipping. The sandcastle they had built together was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to prevent the impending end. A few weeks later, Laura and David's separation was finalized. Without access to assets and with the business project in ruins, David found himself at a dead end. His relationship with Karen, once fueled by adrenaline and lust, had devolved into fights and distrust. On a cold night, David made his last attempt at redemption. He appeared at Laura's door, looking worn and desperate. "Please, Laura, give me another chance. I was wrong, I know, but I love you. And now I realize you're the only person who's ever been there for me." Laura watched him in silence for a few seconds. Here was the man she once loved, but who had also shattered the trust they had. He didn't seem the same anymore, but that didn't matter. Calmly, she replied, "David, love can forgive many things, but it never forgets betrayal." David lowered his head, defeated. "And now, what am I going to do?" Laura took a step back, opening the door as a sign that the conversation was over. "You'll find your way, David, but not with me." He nodded, having no more words to say, and walked away. Shortly after, Karen also found herself in trouble. Without her allowance and without David to support her, she realized she was alone. She tried to reconnect with Laura, But her daughter was firm. "You never saw me as your daughter, only as a pawn you could control," Laura said. "And now you're the one out of control." "I made mistakes, Laura," Karen whispered, a mix of sadness and regret in her voice. Laura looked at her one last time. "That's your problem, not mine." And so, Karen exited Laura's life, without applause or redemption, just the weight of the wrong choices she had made. With David and Karen out of the picture, Laura finally found peace. Her divorce was a liberation, and her revenge was a reminder that no one would ever underestimate her again. Now, without the burden of lies and betrayals, she could start anew. On a sunny afternoon, Laura and Vanessa toasted to this new phase of life. "So, what's next, my friend?" Vanessa asked, curious. Laura smiled, holding her glass of wine. "Whatever comes next, as long as it's by my choice." With a light heart and her head held high, Laura moved forward, ready to live the way she had always wanted. Free, in control of her destiny, and never again settling for less than she deserved.